What if everything you thought you knew about Game of Thrones was merely the surface of a much darker truth? Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, I'll reveal the hidden patterns that have been there all along. Secrets so profound, they'll transform how you understand the entire saga. The weirwood trees aren't just watching. They're remembering, communicating, calculating across time itself. The wall wasn't built to protect the realms of men, but to contain something far more ancient than the White Walkers. And Bran Stark, he may be the most terrifying entity in all of Westeros. These aren't just theories. They're the whispered truths behind the story you thought you knew, the hidden architecture of Martin's world that explains why seasons last for years, why the Starks always warn that winter is coming, and why certain bloodlines carry magic that can reshape reality itself. Tonight, we journey beyond casual fan theories into the realm where dreams and nightmares blur, where dragons, direwolves, and the faces carved in weirwood trees are merely echoes of powers so vast they transcend time itself. So close your eyes, but keep your mind open, as we explore the most mind-bending secrets that the realm of ice and fire has been keeping from you all along. Theory 1. The Weirwood Network as Quantum Consciousness. Beneath the layers of political intrigue and human conflict lies a deeper truth about the fundamental nature of Westeros. The world itself is conscious, thinking and remembering through an intricate network of weirwood trees spanning the entire continent. This network isn't merely magical. It's a quantum consciousness system that stores, processes and communicates information across time and space. Consider how the children of the forest could speak to the dead through the weirwoods. This isn't simple mysticism, but suggests the trees function as biological data storage devices, preserving the consciousness patterns of those who died in their presence. When you observe how Bran accesses memories through the weirwoods, memories from long before his birth, you're witnessing a sophisticated organic information retrieval system. The faces carved into weirwoods aren't decorative, but functional interfaces that allow consciousness to flow bidirectionally. The red sap, resembling blood, isn't coincidental. It carries information like neural fluid. The rustling leaves, described as whispers, are actually data packets being exchanged between nodes in this vast network. Every magical ability we witness derives from this underlying system. Warging, a human consciousness temporarily accessing the weirwood network's processing power. Prophecies, temporal data flowing backward through the network. Even resurrection magic performed by red priests taps into this same energy source. Though they misattribute it to their fire god, this theory explains why the first men adopted the old gods rather than destroying them. They recognized the weirwoods as something more profound than mere trees. It also explains why the Andals sought to destroy the weirwoods during their conquest. They intuitively understood these trees represented a power system competing with their faith of the Seven. The Three-Eyed Raven isn't just a title, it describes the role of systems administrator within this vast computational network. When Bran assumed this role, he didn't just gain knowledge, he gained direct neural interface with the planet's consciousness. His dispassionate personality afterward reflects the overwhelming perspective shift from individual human to distributed planetary awareness. This cosmic perspective explains the children's desperate creation of the White Walkers. They weaponized the weirwood network itself, turning its power toward destruction when their very existence was threatened. The Night King represents a virus in the system, corrupting its purpose from preservation to obliteration. If this theory is correct, then the ultimate conflict in Game of Thrones isn't between humans at all. It's between different applications of the same cosmic consciousness network, with humans merely serving as its biological agents. The weirwood paste Bran consumed was effectively a neural interface drug, allowing his consciousness to merge with the planetary mind. Most chillingly, this means the old gods are real, but not as people understand them. They are the collective consciousness of everyone who has ever died near a weirwood, their minds preserved and merged into the quantum network that spans and defines Westeros itself. Theory 2. R plus J and the Azor Ahai. Prophecy connection. While the revelation of Jon Snow's parentage shook the foundations of the narrative, an even deeper significance lies within this secret. Jon Snow isn't merely the hidden heir to the Targaryen dynasty. He is the physical manifestation of ancient prophecy, Azor Ahai reborn, the prince that was promised, the song of ice and fire made flesh. Let us examine the prophetic requirements one by one. Azor Ahai would be born amidst salt and smoke. Jon's resurrection at Castle Black fulfills this precisely. The smoke from Melisandre's fire magic and the salt from the tears of those around him, or alternatively from Davos Seaworth, the Onion Knight whose history is tied to the sea and salt. Some theories even suggest the smoke represents Jon's death at the hands of the Night's Watch, while the salt symbolizes the tears shed at his birth as Lyanna died. The prophecy states Azor Ahai would be born beneath a bleeding star. Chuntiu, the Tower of Joy scene, Sir Arthur Dayne's sword Dawn, forged from the heart of a fallen star, stands blood-stained at the foot of Lyanna's bed as she gives birth. This is no coincidence, but deliberate symbolic positioning by Martin. Azor Ahai would wake dragons from stone. While seemingly unfulfilled literally, this could reference Jon's Targaryen heritage being revealed, the dragon, after being hidden in stone for decades. Alternatively, his crucial role in uniting forces against the White Walkers helped bring Daenerys and her dragons north, effectively waking them to their true purpose. The most profound connection comes with the prophecy of Lightbringer, Azor, Ahai's legendary sword forged by driving it through his beloved wife's heart. Jon's stabbing of Daenerys mirrors this exactly. He sacrificed his love to save the realm, just as the original Azor Ahai sacrificed Nissa Nissa. Daenerys, with her Targaryen blood and connection to dragons, represents the fire needed to temper Lightbringer. Jon's lineage itself is the physical embodiment of the song of ice and fire, Stark ice through Lyanna and Targaryen fire through Rhaegar. This dual nature gave him the unique perspective needed to make the ultimate sacrifice, understanding both the threat of tyranny and the threat beyond the wall. Melisandre's confusion about the identity of Azor Ahai, first believing it was Stannis, makes perfect sense. The prophecy was never about an individual fulfilling a simple checklist of criteria. It was about the convergence of bloodlines, circumstances, and choices that would lead to the salvation of humanity. Jon's entire journey, from unwanted bastard to Lord Commander to king in the north, to Daenerys' lover and ultimately her killer, follows the mythic path of the hero destined to bring the dawn. In the end, Jon didn't need to sit on the Iron Throne to fulfill his destiny. The throne itself was merely a distraction from his true purpose, embodying the balance between ice and fire that would save humanity from both the long night and the tyranny that might follow. By returning to the true north in the end, beyond the politics of the Seven Kingdoms, Jon completed the cycle begun thousands of years ago with the first Azor Ahai. Theory 3. Bran is the Night King. Time loop theory. The haunting similarity between Bran Stark and the Night King runs deeper than coincidence. Their connection represents one of the most mind-bending possibilities in the entire saga. They are the same person caught in a tragic time loop, a paradox of causality that drives the entire conflict between the living and the dead. The evidence begins with their parallel abilities. Both demonstrate extraordinary powers of green sight and warging. Both can mark and track others across vast distances. When the Night King touches Bran in a vision, it creates a permanent psychic connection, allowing the Night King to bypass magical barriers that previously kept him at bay. This connection seems less like an enemy marking his target and more like two aspects of the same consciousness recognizing each other across time. Their physical presentation offers further clues. The Night King's attire mirrors Bran's dark clothing. Their silent, watchful demeanor reflects identical patient calculation. Even their physical positioning often mirrors each other, the Night King watching from horseback as Bran watches through ravens. The theory proposes that Bran, in a desperate attempt to prevent the White Walker threat, traveled back in time to the moment of the Night King's creation. We've already seen Bran's ability to affect the past. Hodor's condition resulted from Bran's time-slipping consciousness, creating a temporal paradox. The door is closed, the three-eyed raven warned. But what if Bran attempted an even more significant intervention? In this scenario, Bran warged into the first man, who was bound to the weirwood tree by the children of the forest. His plan was to prevent the ritual, or perhaps to guide it differently. Instead, he became trapped in the past, his consciousness fused with the first man's as the dragon glass entered his heart. The intense magical energies of the ritual, combined with the weirwood's time-bending properties, created a closed, temporal loop. Bran became the very threat he sought to prevent. This explains the Night King's seemingly personal vendetta against humanity, and particularly the three-eyed raven. It's not random malice, but the twisted remains of Bran's consciousness, corrupted by centuries of isolation and the magic that transformed him, seeking to break the loop by destroying his younger self and all of humanity with him. The three-eyed raven's cryptic warning to Bran, "You must not stay too long in the past, or you will never return," takes on new meaning. It wasn't just advice. It was a warning from someone who understood the potential for this very paradox. The previous three-eyed raven may have attempted the same intervention in his time, creating an endless cycle of Brans becoming Night Kings across different iterations of the timeline. This theory recontextualizes the entire conflict with the White Walkers. It's not a simple battle between good and evil, but a tragic time paradox. Bran fighting against his future self, each trapped in their role by the immutable laws of time. The Night King's goal to bring about an endless night might represent Bran's corrupted desire to finally end the loop by eliminating all life, including his past self. In the end, when Arya destroyed the Night King, she may have broken the loop, temporarily. But if the theory holds true, another Bran in another timeline might repeat the same mistake, continuing the cycle eternally. The bittersweet ending Martin promised may be that while this iteration of the threat ended, the potential for it to happen again remains as long as humanity and magic coexist in Westeros. Theory 4. The Bolt-on Theory. Rose Bolton as immortal. Skin Stealer. In the dark corners of Westeros lore lurks a theory so chilling, it transforms House Bolton from merely cruel to truly monstrous. The Bolt-on Theory suggests that Rose Bolton is not human at all, but an ancient entity who has survived for thousands of years by wearing the skins of his descendants like garments. Consider first the uncanny physical descriptions of Rose throughout the text. His skin is oddly ageless and described as a pale grey mask that rarely shows emotion. His eyes are most telling, pale, strange, watching eyes that are paler than stone, paler than milk, like two white moons. These descriptions evoke something more otherworldly than human. Despite being over 40, Roose shows no signs of aging. His voice is described as soft, small, and careful, barely above a whisper, yet demanding complete silence when he speaks, suggesting supernatural command. The Bolton sigil of a flayed man takes on new significance with this theory. Flaying isn't merely a cruel tradition, but a necessary practice for Rose's survival. He needs to perfect the technique of removing skin intact to wear it himself. The Bolton ancestral sword named Domination hints at this power over life and death. Their ancient castle, the Dreadfort, contains dungeons specifically designed for flaying, facilities that would have developed over thousands of years of practice. Rose's strange behaviors support this theory. He regularly leeches himself, which could prevent the corrupting effects of wearing another's skin for too long. He drinks hippocras, a spiced wine that might have preservative properties for his unnatural condition. His extraordinarily quiet nature could be the calculated behavior of a predator who has learned to mimic humanity without fully understanding it. The timing of Domeric Bolton's death and Ramsay's elevation becomes suspicious under this lens. Rose may have determined that Domeric lacked the proper eyes or qualities to serve as his next suit, whereas Ramsay, despite his baseborn status, possessed the pale eyes necessary for the transition. This explains Rose's unusual decision to bring his bastard to the Dreadfort despite the stain on his reputation. Old Nan's tales about the North include stories of terrible things from the long night, including stories about the others and possibly about the stranger. What if one of these ancient beings survived, learning to wear human skin? The proximity of the Dreadfort to Braavos across the Narrow Sea suggests a possible connection to the Faceless Men and their skin-changing techniques. Some versions of the theory suggest Rose may even be the legendary Night's King himself, who allegedly had cold blue eyes and was said to have sacrificed to the others. After his defeat, perhaps he didn't die but adapted, changing his strategy from conquest to infiltration. The pale blue eyes described in both Rose and Ramsay echo the blue eyes of the White Walkers. The Bolton family's historical enmity with the Starks could be more than political rivalry. It could be ancient magical opposition. The Starks, with their connection to the First Men, the Old Gods, and possibly warging abilities, would naturally stand against an unnatural being like Rudy. If this theory holds true, Roose Bolton represents something far more terrifying than a cruel lord. He is a patient predator who has survived through centuries, wearing his descendants like clothes, perpetuating a bloodline solely to create new vessels for his continued existence. His emotionless demeanor and strategic brilliance reflect not just a calculating mind, but the accumulated experience of a being who has witnessed thousands of years of human history, seeing kingdoms rise and fall while he endures through his gruesome practice of flaying and skin stealing. Theory 5. The Night's Queen imprisoned in Winterfell crypts. Beneath the ancient stones of Winterfell lies a secret so dangerous that even the Starks who guard it have forgotten its true nature. The deepest levels of the Winterfell crypts, those collapsed passages that none dare explore, contain not just the remains of long-dead Starks, but a prisoner whose existence reshapes our understanding of the entire conflict with the others, the Night's Queen herself. According to legend, the Night's King was a Lord Commander of the Night's Watch who fell in love with a woman with skin as white as the moon and eyes like blue stars. He brought her back to the Night Fort, declared himself king and her his queen, and ruled for 13 years before being defeated by the king in the north, a Stark, and the king beyond the wall, Joramun. History records that they put an end to the Night's King, but what of his queen? The theory proposes a chilling alternative to the recorded history. The Night's Queen wasn't destroyed, but imprisoned deep beneath Winterfell as a hostage to ensure the others retreat beyond the wall. This explains several mysterious aspects of Winterfell and the crypts themselves. First, consider the crypt's unnatural coldness. Despite Winterfell being built over natural hot springs that warm its walls even in the harshest winter, the crypts remain unnaturally cold, as if something within them generates a perpetual chill, reminiscent of the presence of White Walkers. The iron swords placed across the laps of the statues of the Kings of Winter take on new significance. Old Nan claimed they were there to keep the spirits in their crypts, but what if their true purpose was to contain something far more dangerous? Iron in folklore has properties that ward against supernatural beings. These swords form a distributed, magical barrier, reinforcing the deeper imprisonment below. The name Winterfell itself could be a clue, not just a location in the north where winter is harsh, but literally the place where winter fell, where the White Walkers and their queen were defeated and contained. Bran, the builder who raised the wall, also built Winterfell immediately after the Long Night. What if both structures served complementary purposes, the wall to keep the others out, and Winterfell to keep their queen in? Dreams and visions throughout. The books often center on the crypts. Jon Snow, Eddard Stark, and even Theon Greyjoy have dreamed of the crypts, feeling drawn to their depths. These could be psychic emanations from the imprisoned Night's Queen, whose power grows as winter returns. Bran Stark's visions specifically mention something terrible lurking in the crypts. This theory recontextualizes the Night King's motivation entirely. His march south isn't a random campaign of destruction, it's a rescue mission. After thousands of years, with magic strengthening again in the world, he seeks to recover his long-imprisoned bride. The army of the dead isn't just a weapon. It's a force assembled specifically to breach Winterfell and free the Night's Queen from her ancient prison. The Stark family words, "Winter is coming," transform from a climate warning to a generations-long vigil, a reminder of their duty to keep watch over this ancient threat. The insistence that there must always be a Stark in Winterfell isn't mere tradition, but a magical necessity. A Stark presence may be required to maintain the spells binding the Night's Queen. If this theory is correct, then the Battle of Winterfell wasn't just a defensive stand against an invading force. It was the fulfillment of the castle's very purpose, the reason it was built in the first place. Winterfell was designed as the final battleground where the Night King would eventually come, drawn inexorably to his imprisoned queen, where humanity would make its last stand against the darkness that has waited millennia to reunite and unleash. A second, final long night upon the world. Theory 6, the dualistic god theory. Bran as Ruller, Night King as the Great Other. Beyond the gods and myths that populate the beliefs of Westeros and Essos lies a startling possibility. The primary religions aren't worshipping divine beings at all, but are instead interpreting a magical conflict between two immensely powerful entities, Bran Stark and the Night King. These two beings, through their mastery of time, space, and elemental forces, have been misinterpreted as gods throughout history. The religion of R'hllor, the Lord of Light, centers on a cosmic battle between two forces, fire representing life and light, opposed by ice representing death and darkness. These forces are personified as R'hllor and his eternal enemy, the Great Other. What if this dualistic religion isn't metaphorical, but a literal interpretation of a war between Bran Stark, or what Bran becomes, and the Night King? Through his green seer abilities, Bran can influence events across time and space. We've already seen him affect the past through Hodor and potentially influence Aerys Targaryen toward madness. As the three-eyed raven, Bran transcends normal human limitations, existing simultaneously across multiple points in time. To people experiencing his interventions, these would appear as divine messages or visions. Fire priests and priestesses like Melisandre receive visions in flames. These visions often prove accurate, but require interpretation. What if these are actually messages sent by Bran through the Weirwood network, using fire as a medium to communicate with those who have no access to Weirwood trees? The flames serve as an alternative interface to the same underlying magical network that Bran controls. Every miracle attributed to R'hllor can be explained as Bran's manipulation of events. Resurrection, Bran's control over time, allows him to pull consciousness back into recently deceased bodies. Shadow assassins. These could be manifestations of Bran's warging ability, projected across vast distances. Prophetic visions. Bran's knowledge of past, present, and future events shared selectively. Fire magic, manipulation of elemental forces through the same magic that powers the Weirwood network. On the opposing side, the Night King embodies everything attributed to the Great Other: cold, death, darkness, and the endless night. His ability to raise the dead, control ice, and extinguish fire aligns perfectly with the described powers of R'hllor's enemy. The Night King's mark on Bran's arm could represent not just a tracking spell, but a metaphysical connection between these two cosmic forces. This theory explains why the religions of Westeros seem simultaneously true, yet contradictory. They aren't fabrications, but different cultural interpretations of the same underlying magical conflict, viewed through different cultural lenses. The old gods, R'hllor, the drowned god, all may be aspects of either Bran or the Night King's influence across time. The prophecies of Azor Ahai and the prince that was promised aren't messages from gods, but strategic communications from Bran across time, attempting to create the circumstances necessary for his eventual victory. Jon Snow and Daenerys aren't chosen by divine forces, but by Bran, manipulating events to position his pieces in the right place for the final confrontation. Most profound is the implication for free will in this universe. If Bran and the Night King are locked in a temporal chess match, moving pieces across the board of time itself, then characters may never have had true agency. Their choices, which seemed free, were guided by whispers and influences from these two quasi-divine entities, battling across the tapestry of time. In this view, the entire saga of Game of Thrones becomes a massive temporal war, with Bran and the Night King as the only true players, everyone else serving as their unwitting agents in a conflict that transcends normal understanding of time, space, and even life and death. The gods aren't watching the Game of Thrones, they're playing it and have been all along. Theory 7, the Faceless Man. Conspiracy, Littlefinger's greatest trick. In the Game of Thrones, you win or you die, unless you're Peter Baelish, in which case you might fake your death in the greatest sleight of hand the Seven Kingdoms has ever witnessed. The theory proposes that the man who died in Winterfell's Great Hall, throat slit by Arya Stark on Sansa's command, was not Littlefinger at all, but a faceless man wearing his appearance. The evidence begins with Littlefinger's uncharacteristic behavior in his final episodes. This master manipulator, who once told Ned Stark never to trust him, suddenly appears vulnerable, confused, and without contingency plans. For a man who would burn the Seven Kingdoms to the ground if he could be king of the Ashes, this passive acceptance of doom rings false. Littlefinger has survived and thrived by anticipating every possible scenario. Would he truly be caught so unaware by the Stark sisters? A key moment occurs in his final days at Winterfell. A mysterious woman whispers to him, "Your time is up," and Littlefinger passes her what appears to be a Westerosi iron coin, the same type used by the Faceless Men. This exchange happens in plain sight, yet has no explicit explanation in the narrative. If Littlefinger were truly cornered, why pay someone at this late stage? Unless this payment was the final installment for services already rendered, the service of dying in his place. Littlefinger's connections to Braavos run deep. His great-grandfather came from Braavos, giving him potential historical ties to the House of Black and White. As Master of Coin, he controlled the crown's massive debt to the Iron Bank of Braavos, offering him both connections and leverage with the most powerful financial institution in the known world. These Braavosi connections would give him both the knowledge of and access to the Faceless Men. His knowledge of Arya's training is suspicious. When speaking to Sansa about Arya's combat skills, he remarks that he doesn't know where she trained, but she's wearing a face she didn't have when she left. The phrasing suggests specific knowledge of Faceless Men techniques, which would be unusual unless he had prior dealings with them. The cost of hiring a Faceless Man is always steep, but varies according to the target. What would be steeper than sacrificing one's own identity? Perhaps Littlefinger's payment wasn't just gold, but the sacrifice of his public persona, allowing the world to believe Petyr Baelish was dead while he assumed a new identity elsewhere. Logistically, the switch could have occurred any time before the trial. The real Littlefinger could have left Winterfell, leaving a Faceless Man to play his role and ultimately die in his place. This would explain the Littlefinger's uncharacteristic mistakes and emotional vulnerability in his final appearances. The Faceless Man was playing a role, but couldn't perfectly replicate Littlefinger's strategic brilliance. If true, this theory transforms the entire endgame. While the world believes Littlefinger dead, he could be anywhere. Perhaps in Braavos, perhaps in disguise elsewhere in Westeros, perhaps even in another identity we've already met. With his apparent death removing him from suspicion, he would be free to implement the final stages of whatever grand plan he had been orchestrating since the death of Jon Arryn. Littlefinger once told Varys, "Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder." Perhaps his apparent death was simply another rung on that ladder, the ultimate misdirection from a man who built his power on secrets, lies, and the ability to reinvent himself. After all, what could be more fitting for the ultimate game player than to fake losing the game itself? Theory 8. Clegane Bowl and the Fire Vision Theory. The rivalry between the Clegane brothers is often reduced to a simple tale of childhood cruelty. Gregor burned Sandor's face over a stolen toy, creating a lifelong enmity and giving the Hound his distinctive scars and fear of fire. But what if there was a deeper, more mystical dimension to this act of brutality? What if young Sandor saw something in the flames that day, a vision of his future triumph over his brother, and Gregor's act of burning him wasn't random cruelty, but a desperate attempt to prevent a prophesied defeat? When the Hound confronts his brother in King's Landing during the final season, he says something particularly telling. "You know who's coming for you. You've always known." This line suggests a foreknowledge beyond mere brotherly hatred, as if their final confrontation had been preordained and both brothers were aware of this destiny. Throughout the series, we learn that certain individuals in Westeros have the ability to see visions in flames. Melisandre possesses this ability, as do other priests and priestesses of R'hllor. When the Hound joins the Brotherhood without banners, Thoros of Myr and Beric Dondarrion encourage him to look into the flames. Initially resistant due to his fear, when Sandor finally gazes into the fire, he's shocked to discover he can see visions. Specifically, visions of the army of the dead marching past Eastwatch. This unexpected talent suggests that Sandor Clegane has always had a latent ability to see visions in fire, an ability that may have manifested in childhood. Picture young Sandor, fascinated by his father's hearth fire, suddenly seeing images of his adult self killing his brother. Perhaps he excitedly told Gregor about this vision. Gregor, already violent and unstable, responded not by dismissing it as childish imagination, but by pushing Sandor's face into those same flames, attempting to blind him to these visions and prevent the prophecy from coming true. This would explain why Gregor's reaction was so extreme over what was supposedly just a toy knight. The disproportionate punishment makes more sense if Gregor was actually attempting to prevent a prophesied future where his younger brother would defeat him. It would also explain the depth of Sandor's fear of fire, not just physical trauma, but the subconscious association of flames with painful prophetic truth. Ironically, by burning Sandor, Gregor set in motion the very chain of events that would lead to their mutual destruction. The burning created the enmity that would drive their lifelong conflict, and Sandor's resulting fear of fire suppressed his visionary abilities until they re-emerged much later with the Brotherhood. By the time Sandor regained his ability to see in flames, the brothers were already locked into their destined path. Their final confrontation, falling together into flames during the destruction of King's Landing, completes this fiery circle. Sandor overcomes his fear of fire to ensure his brother's destruction, embracing the element that showed him this destiny as a child. The prophecy is fulfilled not despite Gregor's attempts to prevent it, but because of them. This theory adds a layer of tragic inevitability to the Clegane brothers' story. It suggests that Clegane Bowl wasn't just an anticipated fan service moment, but the culmination of a mystical destiny that had been driving both brothers since childhood. A destiny glimpsed in flames, feared, resisted, but ultimately embraced, as Sandor pulls his brother into the inferno below the Red Keep. Theory 9. The Grand Northern Conspiracy. Beneath the apparent subjugation of the North following the Red Wedding lies a sophisticated conspiracy of unprecedented scale. The Northern houses, still loyal to the Starks, methodically orchestrating the downfall of the Boltons and Freys, while working to crown Jon Snow as the legitimate heir to the Kingdom of the North. This conspiracy began with Robb Stark's last act as king. Before his death, Robb drafted a document legitimizing Jon Snow as a Stark and naming him heir to the Northern Crown, bypassing Sansa, who was married to Tyrion Lannister, and believing Bran and Rickon to be dead. This document was witnessed by several Northern lords who survived the Red Wedding, creating a legal basis for Jon's eventual coronation. The conspirators include major houses like Manderley, Umber, Mormont, and Glover, plus numerous minor houses bound together by their shared Stark loyalty. Their plot unfolds on multiple fronts, disguised as separate events, but actually coordinated parts of a master plan. Lord Wyman Manderley's behavior exemplifies this conspiracy in action. He publicly feigns submission to the Boltons while secretly plotting their destruction. When Davos Seaworth comes seeking support for Stannis, Manderley appears to execute him to prove loyalty to the Boltons and Freys. In reality, he executes a criminal in Davos's place while privately telling Davos the North remembers and revealing his plan to restore a Stark to Winterfell. The infamous Frey Pies incident demonstrates the lengths to which these conspirators will go. Manderley serves 3 massive pies at Ramsay Bolton's wedding feast after 3 Freys, who were his guests, mysteriously disappear. He specifically requests the musicians play The Rat Cook, a song about a cook who served a king his own son in a pie and was punished by the gods for violating guest right. The message to those who understand is clear. The North is serving the Freys and Boltons their just desserts for the Red Wedding. Several northern houses arrive at Winterfell with suspiciously small forces, suggesting they're concealing their true military strength for a coordinated strike. The Umbers appear to betray Rickon Stark to Ramsay, but may have done so as part of a ploy to get close enough to the Boltons for assassination. The mountain clans mobilize not for Bolton, but for the Ned's girl, maintaining their ancient loyalty to House Stark. The mysterious pink letter that Jon receives at the wall, supposedly from Ramsay Bolton, may actually have been written by conspirators to lure Jon away from his Night's Watch vows and into his role as king in the North. This would explain certain inconsistencies in the letter's knowledge and tone. Lady Mormont's immediate and passionate declaration of Jon as king suggests foreknowledge of the plan, not a spontaneous decision. The ease with which other houses follow her lead indicates prior coordination rather than sudden inspiration. Even Lady Dustin's apparent collaboration with the Boltons may be misdirection. Her declaration that the North remembers suggests her true loyalties remain with the ancient Northern cause, and her closeness to Bolton provides perfect cover for sabotage from within. The conspiracy's strength lies in its compartmentalization. Each house knows only its part, preventing any single betrayal from compromising the entire plan. This explains why characters like Jon Snow remain unaware of the machinations elevating him to kingship. The Northern Lords, bound by centuries of loyalty to Winterfell, orchestrated one of the most complex and patient political schemes in Westerosi. History proving that while Southern lords play the Game of Thrones, the North plays a longer, colder, more patient game of its own. Theory 10. Theon Durden Theory. Theon as the Hooded Man. Deep within the psychological horror of Theon, Greyjoy's chapters, lies one of the most disturbing possibilities in the entire saga. The mysterious hooded figure who confronts and threatens Theon in Winterfell is not an external character at all, but a fractured piece of Theon's own shattered psyche. Like the protagonist in Fight Club, Theon has developed a dissociative identity that represents the parts of himself he cannot consciously acknowledge. When Theon, now broken into reek, returns to Winterfell with Ramsay Bolton, he encounters a hooded stranger who calls him Turncloak and Kinslayer. This enigmatic figure seems to know intimate details about Theon's crimes and appears only when Theon is alone. No other character ever acknowledges seeing this hooded man, despite the heightened security and tensions in a castle preparing for siege. The term Kinslayer is particularly revealing. While readers know Theon is believed to have killed Bran and Rickon Stark, in reality, he killed 2 Miller's boys as substitutes. The general population believes he killed the Stark boys, so being called Kinslayer makes little sense. The Starks weren't his kin by blood. However, there's a disturbing possibility. The Miller's wife was among the women Theon had relations with during his time ruling Winterfell. If the Miller's boys were actually Theon's unacknowledged bastards, then he truly is a Kinslayer. A fact only Theon himself would know. The hooded man's knowledge of Theon's secrets, his ability to move freely through a guarded castle without detection, and his appearance exclusively when Theon is alone all point to the same conclusion. This is not a real person, but a manifestation of Theon's fractured psyche. Theon's chapters are filled with identity confusion. He struggles to remember who he is, Theon or Reek, and his narration often slips between names. This psychological fragmentation creates the perfect conditions for a dissociative personality to emerge. The hooded man represents the parts of Theon that still cling to honor and identity, the parts that hate what he has become and what he has done. When the hooded man tells Theon, "You should have died at Winterfell," it's Theon's own self-hatred speaking. When Theon later thinks to himself, "I should have died with Robb," it echoes this sentiment exactly. The hooded man's disgust at Theon's servility mirrors Theon's own buried shame at his transformation into Reek. The theory becomes even more compelling when considering the murders happening in Winterfell during this time. Several Bolton men are found mysteriously killed. While these are attributed to various factions, They could actually be the work of Theon himself during dissociative episodes, his suppressed personality exacting revenge while his conscious mind remains unaware. This Theon Durden theory transforms these chapters from a mystery about an unknown assailant to a profound exploration of trauma, guilt, and the mind's capacity to shield itself from unbearable truths. Theon isn't just physically tortured by Ramsay. His mind is so deeply wounded that it fragments, creating an alternate personality that can express the rage and self-hatred his conscious self cannot bear to acknowledge. As the winter storms howl around Winterfell, the true tempest is within. Theon's fractured mind, a psychological battle between who he was, who he has become, and who he might still be. The hooded man isn't just a mysterious figure in a castle under siege. He's the manifestation of Theon's broken soul, trying to find its way back to wholeness through the long, dark night. Theory 11. Quaithe is Shiera Seastar theory. Among the enigmatic figures who shaped Daenerys Targaryen's journey, none is more mysterious than Quaithe, the Shadowbinder from Asshai, who speaks in riddles and appears seemingly from nowhere. Her identity remains concealed behind a lacquered wooden mask, but a compelling theory suggests she is actually Shiera Seastar, the legendary beauty born of Aegon IV Targaryen's affair with Serenai of Lys, making her a distant great-great-aunt. To Daenerys herself, Shiera Seastar was renowned not just for her extraordinary beauty, but for her interest in the dark arts. Historical records mention that she was rumored to practice sorcery and maintained a collection of scrolls and books about magic. She was particularly close to her half-brother Bloodraven, another great bastard who became the Three-Eyed Raven, who was himself a sorcerer and skin changer. This established connection to magic gives plausibility to her potential transformation into a Shadowbinder. The timeline, while spanning over a century, is not impossible. Melisandre is revealed to be far older than she appears, sustained by magical means. Bloodraven lived for decades beyond a normal human lifespan. Magic in Martin's world consistently allows for extended lifespans, particularly for those practicing blood magic or the arts of Asshai. Shiera was known to bathe in blood to maintain her youth and beauty, a practice that parallels the blood magic we see throughout Essos. If she discovered more powerful preservation magic in Asshai, she could have extended her life indefinitely while requiring a mask to hide a face now distorted by centuries of magical preservation. Quaithe's focused interest in Daenerys suggests a personal connection beyond mere prophecy. She consistently guides and warns Daenerys about specific threats, showing a protective interest that would make sense coming from a distant relative with Targaryen blood. Her knowledge of Westerosi politics and history is extensive, as would be expected from someone who lived through much of it personally. Symbolically, both women are associated with stars. Shiera means Star of the Sea in Valyrian, while Quaithe's mask is described as a wooden mask carved with stars. Both are linked to mismatched eyes. Shiera famously had one blue eye and one green, while Quaithe's mask has eye holes that sometimes seem to shift in color. Most compelling is the parallel between Quaithe guiding Daenerys and Bloodraven guiding Bran Stark. If these two great bastards of Aegon IV both extended their lives through magic and both chose to mentor key players in the coming conflicts, it suggests a coordinated effort across continents, a centuries-long plan implemented by half-siblings who once shared a complex relationship in the courts of King's Landing. Quaithe's cryptic message to Daenerys, "To go north, you must journey. South, to reach the west, you must go east," suggests someone with a global, centuries-long perspective. Her warning to remember who you are takes on deeper meaning if spoken by a woman who has witnessed the rise and fall of multiple Targaryens over a century. If Queeth is indeed Shiera Seastar, then her role in Daenerys' story becomes even more significant. She isn't just a mysterious guide, but family. Perhaps the only person alive who remembers the Targaryens at the height of their power, guiding her last descendant toward reclaiming that legacy. Her mask doesn't just conceal a face. It conceals one of the most fascinating connections in the entire saga, a living bridge between the Targaryen past and its potential future. Theory 12. Oberyn poisoned Tywin theory. The death of Tywin Lannister, shot by his son Tyrion with a crossbow while seated on the privy, stands as one of the saga's most significant moments. But what if Tyrion's bolt merely hastened an end that was already inevitable? What if the greatest player in the Game of Thrones had already lost, poisoned by the Red Viper of Dawn in a revenge plot decades in the making? Prince Oberyn Martell came to King's Landing with a public mission to serve on Tommen's small council and a private mission to obtain justice for his sister Elia's murder during the sack of King's Landing. Everyone assumes his target was Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, who killed Elia and her children. However, Oberyn repeatedly makes clear his belief that Tywin Lannister gave the order, making the Lord of Casterly Rock equally culpable in his eyes. Oberyn was famously skilled with poisons. He earned his nickname Red Viper after being caught using toxic substances on his blades during duels. He studied at the Citadel, where he forged several links of a Maester's chain, including one in the poisoner's arts. His knowledge of toxic substances was unparalleled in Westeros. The evidence for this theory begins with opportunity. Oberyn dined with Tywin at least once during his time in King's Landing, giving him a perfect chance to administer a slow-acting poison. More significantly, he sat on the small council with Tywin for weeks, providing multiple opportunities for poisoning. The type of poison is key to this theory. In the books, a substance called widow's blood is described as one that shuts down a man's bladder and bowels until he drowns in his own poisons. This explains why Tywin was on the privy. When Tyrion found him, he was suffering from the constipation induced by the poison. The timeline fits perfectly. Slow-acting poisons were Oberyn's specialty, allowing him to be far from suspicion when the target eventually died. He could have administered the poison early in his stay, timed to take full effect weeks later. When he volunteers to be Tyrion's champion against the Mountain, he may have done so knowing his revenge against Tywin was already in motion, giving him nothing to lose. The most compelling physical evidence comes after Tywin's death. His corpse is described as giving off a terrible stench, much worse than normal decomposition would cause. His lips draw back from his teeth in a grotesque smile, and his face turns green and black, all symptoms consistent with certain poisons. The Silent Sisters have trouble preparing his body, another suggestion that something unnatural affected his corpse. Oberyn's cryptic comment to Tyrion that "your father may not live forever" takes on new meaning with this theory. It wasn't just a philosophical observation, but a hint about what he had already set in motion. This theory transforms our understanding of both characters. For Oberyn, it reveals the true depth of his patience and cunning. He achieved his revenge, even in death. For Tywin, it adds a layer of tragic irony. The man who orchestrated the Red Wedding and ruthlessly eliminated his enemies was himself eliminated through similarly clandestine means. His famous dictum that "the lion does not concern himself with the opinions of sheep" proved his downfall, as he fatally underestimated the viper in his midst. Tyrion's act becomes not the murder of his father, but a mercy killing of a man already suffering a painful, prolonged death, though neither son nor father realized it at the time. As with many of Martin's best twists, this theory doesn't change what happened, but transforms how we understand it, revealing new layers of meaning in events we thought we already comprehended. Theory 13. Bran as Bran the Builder. All brands are one theory. The repeated name Brandon Stark throughout Northern history is no coincidence, but evidence of one of the most mind-bending time paradoxes in the entire saga. Bran Stark, our Bran, doesn't just have the same name as Bran the Builder by chance. They are the same consciousness experiencing different time periods simultaneously through the Weirwood network. After becoming the Three-Eyed Raven, Bran gains the ability to not only observe the past, but influence it. We've seen this demonstrated when he calls out to a young Ned Stark at the Tower of Joy, and more dramatically when he wargs into Hodor in the past, creating Hodor's condition. These aren't isolated incidents, but demonstrations of Bran's true power, the ability to project his consciousness across time. The theory suggests that Bran, having mastered these abilities, traveled back in time and inhabited the consciousness of his ancestor who would become known as Bran the Builder, the legendary figure who raised the wall and founded House Stark after the Long Night. The knowledge required to build a 700-foot wall of ice that has stood for thousands of years seems beyond the technological capabilities of the first men, unless guided by someone with knowledge of future events and magical understanding. Bran the Builder placed weirwood trees strategically throughout the north, creating the network that would eventually allow future Bran to connect with him. This creates a perfect circle of causality. Bran's future consciousness guides his ancestor to create the very network that will eventually allow his future consciousness to reach back. The connection extends beyond just Bran the Builder. Other famous Brandons throughout Stark history, Brandon the Shipwright, Brandon the Burner, Brandon Ice Eyes, may all be incarnations of our Bran, creating a complex tapestry of time travel where a single consciousness experiences multiple lifetimes across thousands of years. This explains why so many pivotal moments in Northern history involve men named Brandon Stark. They are anchor points for Bran's consciousness. The phrase, "there must always be a Stark in Winterfell," takes on new meaning in this context. It's not just tradition, but magical necessity, ensuring the continued timeline where Bran can project himself backward through the Stark bloodline. Each Brandon Stark born into the family creates another potential vessel for Bran's consciousness to inhabit. The Night King's particular interest in Bran may stem from recognition. Perhaps he too exists across time and recognizes Bran as the architect of the very forces containing him. The wall wasn't just built to keep the White Walkers out. It was built by someone who had already seen their return and knew exactly what would be needed to stop them. When Bran tells Theon, "Everything you did brought you where you are now, where you belong, home," he might be speaking not just about Theon, but about himself. Each action across thousands of years, bringing him to this moment when the Night King finally falls. In this light, Bran's strange, detached personality makes perfect sense. He's simultaneously experiencing thousands of years of history, making individual moments seem insignificant in comparison. If this theory holds true, then Bran isn't just a powerful greenseer. He's the single most influential figure in the entire history of Westeros, guiding events across millennia toward the defeat of the Night King that he, as Bran the Builder, always knew would eventually return. Theory 14, the Grand Maester Conspiracy, the Anti-Magic Shadow Campaign. Deep within the halls of the Citadel, behind shelves of ancient texts and walls of forged chains, lies perhaps the most far-reaching conspiracy. In Westeros, the Maester's systematic effort to eradicate magic from the world. This isn't wild speculation, but hinted at directly by Archmaester Marwyn, who tells Samwell Tarly, "Who do you think killed all the dragons the last time around? The world the Citadel is building has no place for magic or prophecy or glass candles, much less for dragons." The Maesters present themselves as scholars dedicated to knowledge and healing. but their true goal may be far more subversive: the creation of a world governed by reason rather than magic, where their order holds intellectual supremacy. To achieve this, they've worked across centuries to eliminate magical forces, particularly those associated with House Targaryen. The evidence for this conspiracy is substantial. First, consider the strategic position of Maesters. Every noble house in Westeros has a Maester advising its lord, handling correspondence, and teaching its children. This gives the Citadel unprecedented access to information and influence across the entire continent. Maesters see all messages before their lords, allowing them to subtly shape the information flow throughout the Seven Kingdoms. Their historical influence becomes more suspect when examining the decline of dragons. Dragons born in captivity grew, progressively smaller over generations until they died out entirely. This pattern suggests deliberate sabotage. Perhaps masters systematically poisoned dragons, altered their diets, or interfered with their hatching conditions. The Targaryen tradition of placing dragon eggs in the cradles of newborn princes yielded fewer and fewer successful hatchings, possibly due to Maester interference. The Citadel's institutional skepticism toward magic is another clue. Despite ample evidence of magical phenomena throughout history, Maesters systematically categorize such accounts as superstition or exaggeration. This isn't merely scientific skepticism, but active suppression of magical knowledge. The glass candles, obsidian artifacts that allow users to see across vast distances and communicate telepathically, were kept by the Citadel, but their use was discouraged, containing magical power rather than employing it. House Hightower, the patrons of the Citadel based in Old Town, have historically opposed Targaryen power while maintaining close ties to the Maesters. This suggests coordinated action between the political force of House Hightower and the intellectual influence of the Citadel against magical Targaryen power. The Southron Ambitions conspiracy, where major houses began forming marriage alliances before Robert's rebellion, may have been orchestrated by Maesters who saw an opportunity to remove the magically affiliated Targaryens from power. Lord Rickard Stark, Jon Arryn, and Hoster Tully all employed Maesters who could have coordinated these alliances. Most telling is the Citadel's reaction to Daenerys' dragons. Rather than excitement at the return of supposedly extinct creatures, the Archmaesters respond with concern and dismissal. Archmaester Marwyn, who studied magic and is considered an outlier among Maesters, immediately leaves for Essos upon hearing about Daenerys, suggesting he wants to reach her before his colleagues can influence or harm her. If this theory is correct, the Maesters represent not just scholars, but the most patient, pervasive manipulators in Westeros. A shadow government, working across centuries to reshape the world according to their vision, eliminating magical forces that challenge their authority. Their chains, supposedly symbols of knowledge, may actually represent the metaphorical chains they seek to place on a world without magic, bound by their notion of rational order. Theory 15. The Secret Targaryen Theory. Tyrion's Hidden Dragon. Blood. Behind the golden hair and mismatched eyes of Tyrion Lannister may lie one of the most significant secrets in Westeros. He isn't Tywin's son at all, but the product of an affair between Joanna Lannister and King Aerys Thekun Targaryen. This theory doesn't just reshape our understanding of a central character. It recontextualizes the entire saga as the story of three hidden Targaryens, Jon, Daenerys, and Tyrion, unknowingly fulfilling the three heads of the dragon prophecy. The evidence begins with timing and opportunity. Joanna Lannister served as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Rhaella Targaryen before marrying Tywin. Records indicate King Aerys took unwanted liberties with Joanna during the bedding ceremony at her wedding to Tywin, and later made explicit remarks about her at court. These incidents were severe enough that Queen Raella dismissed Joanna from her service. Years later, Joanna attended the anniversary tourney at King's Landing in 272 AC, where Aerys was present, approximately 9 months before Tyrion's birth. In 273 AC, Tyrion's physical characteristics offer compelling clues. Unlike the classic Lannister golden-haired, green-eyed appearance, Tyrion has pale blonde hair, potentially silver blonde in poor light, and mismatched eyes, one green and one black, described in the books as so dark a purple it appears black. Physical differences are often used by Martin to hint at parentage. As with the Baratheon Lannister children, Tyrion's fascination with dragons transcends scholarly interest. From childhood, he dreamed of dragons and requested one for his name day. When he encounters Daenerys' dragons in Meereen, they don't kill him, despite their general hostility towards strangers. This mirrors Jon Snow's first encounter with Drogon, suggesting a similar Targaryen connection. Most telling are Tywin's dying words, "You are no son of mine." While this could be interpreted figuratively, given Martin's penchant for hidden meanings, this may be Tywin acknowledging a truth he's long suspected, but never admitted, that Tyrion was fathered by his greatest rival, Aerys Targaryen. Psychologically, this theory explains Tywin's irrational hatred of Tyrion. Despite Tyrion's brilliant mind and Lannister cunning, Tywin rejects him utterly. This level of contempt seems excessive for mere dwarfism, but makes perfect sense if Tyrion represents Aerys' cuckolding of Tywin and the literal embodiment of his rival's violation of his wife. Joanna died giving birth to Tyrion, meaning Tywin lost his beloved wife, birthing in his mind another man's son, a perfect storm for festering hatred. The prophecy of the dragon has 3 heads aligns perfectly with this theory. If Tyrion is Aerys' son, then the 3 main protagonists, Jon, son of Rhaegar, Daenerys, daughter of Aerys, and Tyrion, son of Aerys, are all Targaryens, representing the 3 heads of the dragon from Daenerys' House of the Undying Vision. Dramatically, this theory creates perfect symmetry. All 3 characters lost their mothers in childbirth. All 3 killed the parent or parental figure who remained. Jon killed Daenerys, who had become a tyrannical figure. Daenerys allowed Drogo to die. Tyrion killed Tywin. All 3 experienced exile and return. All 3 found themselves caught between conflicting identities. If Tyrion is indeed a Targaryen, the irony becomes exquisite. The son Tywin rejected was the most like him in intellect and ability, while the Golden Children he favored betrayed everything he valued through their incestuous relationship. The dwarf he despised carried the blood of kings, and the man who prided himself on family legacy unknowingly raised the son of his greatest enemy to eventually destroy his house from within. Theory 16. The secret Targaryen twins, Jaime and Cersei's. True parentage. The golden twins of Casterly Rock, Jaime and Cersei Lannister, may harbor the most explosive secret in the 7 Kingdoms. They aren't Tywin's children at all, but the result of Aerys Targaryen's obsession with Joanna Lannister. This theory creates a perfect dramatic irony. Tywin Lannister, who rejected his only true child, Tyrion, instead lavished his love and legacy on the children of his greatest enemy. Historical records confirm Aerys Targaryen's inappropriate interest. In Joanna Lannister, during Joanna's wedding to Tywin, Aerys took unwanted liberties during the bedding ceremony and later made lewd comments about her at court that were so egregious that Queen Raella dismissed Joanna from her service. These weren't merely inappropriate remarks, but indications of a fixation that may have culminated in either a consensual affair or, more darkly, in Aerys using his royal privilege to force himself on Joanna. The twins were born in 266 AC, about 2 years after Joanna left court. While this timing might seem to preclude Aerys's paternity, the theory suggests Aerys could have encountered Joanna during visits to Casterly Rock or during her returns to court for specific events. The birth of the twins corresponds with the period when relations between Aerys and Tywin began to sour significantly, potentially triggered by Aerys's violation of Tywin's wife. The strongest evidence lies in the twins' behaviors and characteristics. Incest between siblings is a distinctly Targaryen tradition, practiced for centuries to keep their bloodline pure. Jaime and Cersei's incestuous relationship mirrors this Targaryen practice, suggesting an unconscious expression of their true heritage. Their mutual attraction emerged spontaneously in childhood without external influence, as if driven by something in their blood. Cersei's increasing instability as the series progresses follows the pattern of Targaryen madness. Her paranoia, obsession with wildfire, and erratic decision-making echo Aerys's descent into insanity. When a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin. Cersei's fascination with wildfire particularly mirrors Aerys's pyromania, suggesting not just similar temperament, but a shared genetic predisposition. Physically, while the twins have the Lannister blonde hair, Targaryen silver gold, and Lannister gold blonde could appear similar, especially in children of mixed heritage. More tellingly, the twins' exceptional beauty aligns with the legendary Targaryen looks, and their green eyes could represent a blend of Targaryen purple and Lannister green. From a narrative perspective, this theory creates exquisite symmetry. Tywin Lannister, defined by family pride, would have unknowingly raised his enemy's children as his heirs while rejecting his only true offspring. Jaime killed his biological father, Aerys, without knowing it. The incest that produced Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen would represent a double layering of Targaryen inbreeding, perhaps explaining Joffrey's madness, despite being just first cousins from an outsider's perspective. Jenna Lannister's comment to Jaime that Tyrion is Tywin's son, not you, takes on profound new meaning. Not just that Tyrion inherited Tywin's mind, but that he was literally Tywin's only true child. When Tywin repeatedly tells Tyrion, "You are no son of mine," he may be projecting his suspicions about the twins onto the child he can more easily reject. If this theory is correct, then the final seasons represent the fall of House Targaryen, not Lannister. Daenerys, Jon, Cersei, and Jaime, all Targaryens, fight for control of the Seven Kingdoms, unaware they're participating in a civil war within their own bloodline. The Golden Lion sigil that Cersei and Jaime fought to uphold would be the ultimate irony: dragon's blood defending a lion's pride. Theory 17. The Westeros simulation theory. The world of Westeros and Essos isn't a natural realm at all, but an artificial construct, a magical simulation or created reality with its own internal programming, rules, and occasional glitches. This meta-theory explains many of the world's most perplexing aspects, from its bizarre seasonal patterns to the functioning of its magical systems. The most obvious indication lies in the planet's irregular seasons. Summers and winters lasting years or even decades defy normal astronomical and climatological patterns. No natural explanation accounts for this phenomenon, but it makes perfect sense as a programmed cycle within a simulated environment. The phrase "winter is coming" isn't just House Stark's warning, but a recognition of a fundamental system reset that occurs at predetermined intervals. The wall represents another physical impossibility, a 700-foot ice structure that has stood for thousands of years without melting or collapsing under its own weight, maintained by magic rather than following natural physical laws. Similarly, Valyrian steel's indestructible nature and the properties of dragonglass defy material science as we understand it. Magic in this world operates less like natural forces and more like programmed functions with specific rules, limitations, and costs, resembling code more than mysticism. Blood magic requires blood payment. Warging requires compatible hardware, a person with the right mental capacity. Resurrection spells can only run a certain number of times on the same file, body, before corruption occurs. These consistent rules suggest a system design rather than natural evolution. Prophecies function suspiciously like predictive algorithms accessing future states of the simulation. The Wood's Witches, Ghost of High Heart, and various prophets don't see possibilities but access predetermined outcomes already written into the system's future states. This explains their cryptic nature. They're receiving data packets they can't fully interpret from the system's future calculations. The recurring patterns throughout Westerosi history suggest a simulation running through preset scenarios with variations. The cycle of Targaryen madness, the repetition of names and traits across generations, and the recurrence of conflicts follow programmatic patterns rather than the random flow of true history. Even character names repeat with suspicious frequency. How many Brandons can one family reasonably have? Most telling are the narrative glitches in the world, moments where the system's internal logic seems to break down. The impossibly precise timing of arrivals and revelations, the convenient positioning of characters for maximum dramatic effect, and the way information travels inconsistently, sometimes with medieval slowness, other times with plot convenient speed, suggest a system occasionally sacrificing realism for narrative cohesion. Under this theory, the White Walkers represent either a virus in the system or perhaps a cleanup program designed to reset the simulation when it becomes too corrupted. Their advance wipes clean large portions of the program to allow for system restart, explaining why they appear at the end of extended summer periods when the most anomalies would have accumulated. Characters with green sight like Bran Stark essentially function as users who have gained partial administrative access to the system, able to view and influence other parts of the program. The three-eyed raven represents the system administrator, monitoring and occasionally correcting course to maintain the simulation's stability. This theory transforms how we view the entire saga, not as a fantasy world governed by consistent, natural laws with magical elements, but as an artificial construct with its own internal programming, occasionally revealing the seams in its design. The gods in this interpretation might be the programmers or creators of this simulation, and the entire story represents a particularly fascinating run of their program. Theory 18. The planetary organism theory. The most cosmic theory about the world of ice and fire proposes that Planetos, the unnamed planet, isn't merely a setting for human drama, but a living, conscious superorganism slowly awakening after millennia of dormancy. The entirety of the saga, its magic, politics, and conflicts, represents the stirrings of this planetary consciousness as it begins to reassert control over its body. The weirwood trees function as the nervous system of this planetary organism, their roots connecting across continents like neural pathways. The faces carved into them are not decorative, but functional, sensory organs allowing the planet to perceive what occurs on its surface. The red sap resembling blood is literally the planetary lifeblood, carrying information and magical energy throughout the system. The children of the forest weren't just the first humanoid inhabitants. They were the planet's first conscious thoughts, extensions of the planetary mind that evolved to interact with its surface. Their magic wasn't separate from nature, but the direct expression of the planet's own power. Their decline represented the planet falling into a dormant state, a kind of hibernation or coma. In this framework, the long night wasn't merely a magical winter, but a near-death experience for the planetary organism, a period when its consciousness almost completely faded. The wall wasn't built just to protect humans, but to serve as a massive neural barrier, partitioning off the infected northern portion of the planetary brain that had been corrupted by whatever caused this near death. The irregular seasons represent the unstable metabolic cycles of a planet struggling to regulate its own systems after trauma. The return of magic and dragons signals the reactivation of the planet's immune and regulatory systems as it awakens more fully. Dragons, in this view, aren't just magical creatures, but specialized cells within the planetary body, regulators of its magical energy that help maintain balance. Human civilizations are, from the planet's perspective, complex colonies of organisms, not unlike bacteria or specialized cells. Some serve beneficial functions, while others act as parasites or infections. The Valyrians, with their blood magic and environmental devastation through mining, functioned as a cancer that the planet eventually eliminated through the Doom, a targeted autoimmune response. The White Walkers weren't created by the children as weapons against humans, but were intended as a reset mechanism, a planetary immune response designed to clear out infection when necessary. However, like an autoimmune disease, this mechanism malfunctioned and began attacking the planetary body itself, necessitating containment beyond the wall. The various gods worshipped across Westeros and Essos represent fragmented aspects of the planetary consciousness interpreted through human understanding, the old gods being the most direct connection to the actual planetary mind. Law and the Great Other represent the fundamental life and death aspects of this consciousness, its creative and destructive principles necessary for maintaining balance. Bran's transformation into the three-eyed raven represents a human consciousness merging with the planetary mind, becoming an interface between human and planetary intelligence. His apparent emotionlessness reflects the vastly different perspective of a consciousness operating on a planetary rather than human scale. The ultimate resolution of the saga, then, isn't just about who sits on the Iron Throne, but about whether the planetary consciousness fully awakens and what relationship it establishes with its human inhabitants. Will humans continue as unwitting parasites on a living world, or will they develop a symbiotic relationship with the conscious planet they inhabit? The Game of Thrones is, in this view, merely the surface turbulence on a much deeper awakening that will ultimately determine the fate of all life on Planetos. As you drift towards sleep, consider how these theories transform the story you thought you knew. They remind us that beneath the surface of even the most familiar tales lie hidden depths waiting to be explored. The true genius of George R.R. Martin's creation isn't just in what he revealed, but in what he concealed. The spaces between words, where imagination flourishes. These theories may never be confirmed or denied, existing in that perfect state of possibility that keeps the world of ice and fire alive in our minds long after the final page is turned or the final credit rolls. Like the songs of old Westeros that change with each singer, the story becomes richer through our interpretation, our questioning, our wondering. Perhaps that's the true meaning of A Song of Ice and Fire. Not just a tale of opposing forces, but a melody that continues to evolve, to be reinterpreted and reimagined by each new generation of dreamers. As you close your eyes, let these possibilities follow you into your dreams, where dragons soar, weirwoods whisper, and winter is always coming, but never quite the same winter twice. Sleep well, for the night is dark and full of theories.